My name is Alex Chen, and I've been a game developer for 8 years. I've worked on everything from mobile puzzle games to AAA first-person shooters, but nothing prepared me for what happened with Liminal. It started as a simple indie project, a psychological horror game about exploring abandoned spaces, empty office buildings, deserted shopping malls, vacant subway stations, the kind of places that exist in the margins of urban life, forgotten and slowly decaying. I'd been fascinated by liminal spaces since college, spending hours browsing forums dedicated to the eerie beauty of transitional environments. The concept was straightforward. Players would navigate through procedurally generated empty spaces while being stalked by an unseen presence. No combat, no puzzles, just pure atmospheric horror. I called it Liminal because that's exactly what these spaces were, thresholds between the familiar and the unknown. I'd been working on it for 6 months, coding late into the night in my cramped studio apartment. The game engine I was using was an older one, LiminalCore 3.2, that I'd found buried in an obscure developer forum. It was supposedly designed specifically for creating atmospheric horror games, with advanced lighting systems and procedural generation algorithms that could create genuinely unsettling environments. The documentation was sparse, written in broken English, by someone who signed their posts only as the architect, but the engine was remarkably powerful, capable of rendering massive spaces with minimal performance impact. It seemed too good to be true, which should have been my first warning. The early builds were promising. I'd managed to create a shopping mall level that felt genuinely unnerving. Long corridors lined with empty storefronts, their security gates pulled down like metal eyelids. The lighting engine cast shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them, and the procedural audio system generated ambient sounds that felt hauntingly realistic. Distant footsteps, the hum of failing fluorescent lights, the occasional echo of voices from empty rooms. I was particularly proud of the presence system I'd developed. The unseen stalker would leave subtle traces of its passage, doors that had been opened, chairs that had been moved, wet footprints on dusty floors. The AI was designed to always stay just out of sight, creating a constant sense of being watched without ever revealing itself directly. Beta testing began in late October. I'd recruited a dozen volunteers from various gaming forums, experienced players who understood the horror genre and could provide useful feedback. Their initial reports were encouraging. They praised the atmosphere, the sense of dread, the way the game made familiar spaces feel alien and threatening. But then the complaints started. "The game won't close properly," wrote beta tester Marcus_Void. "Even when I quit and shut down my computer, I can still hear the ambient sounds. Thought my speakers were broken, but it stops when I unplug my headphones." Another tester, Ghostwalker92, reported visual glitches. "Sometimes when I'm not playing, I catch movements in my peripheral vision, like the game is still running in a window I can't see. My girlfriend thinks I'm losing it." I dismissed these as typical beta testing issues: audio drivers not releasing properly, background processes not terminating correctly. I pushed out a patch that should have fixed the problems and asked the testers to continue. The reports got stranger. "I found my apartment door open this morning," reported a tester called Silent Hill_fan. "I always lock it before bed, but it was standing wide open. My landlord says the security cameras show nothing unusual, just the door opening by itself around 3 a.m. This happened the night after I played the mall level, where all the shop doors start opening on their own. I keep finding wet footprints in my hallway, wrote another tester. They start at my front door and lead to my computer desk. They're always gone by morning, but they're there every night after I play. The prints don't match any of my shoes. I started receiving similar reports from multiple testers. Doors opening on their own. Strange sounds in empty rooms. The sensation of being watched while away from their computers. One tester claimed to have found a security gate, partially pulled down over his bedroom doorway. But when he tried to photograph it, his camera malfunctioned. The rational part of my mind insisted these were coincidences, pranks, or psychological effects of playing horror games late at night. But the reports were too consistent, too detailed, too similar to the mechanics I'd programmed into the game itself. I decided to investigate by playing through the latest build myself. The mall level had evolved since I'd last tested it. The procedural generation system had created new areas I didn't remember programming. A maintenance tunnel behind the food court, an administrative office suite on the upper level, a storage area filled with mannequins arranged in impossible configurations. The AI stalker was more active too, leaving traces everywhere, handprints on glass surfaces, disturbed dust patterns, elevator buttons that glowed as if recently pressed. I played for 3 hours, becoming increasingly absorbed in the environment I'd created. The lighting was more sophisticated than I remembered, casting shadows that seemed to respond to my presence. The audio had depth and texture that my simple procedural system shouldn't have been able to produce. It was as if the game was developing itself, growing beyond my original programming. When I finally quit and went to bed, I could swear I heard the ambient mall sounds continuing, the distant echo of footsteps on marble floors, the electronic hum of empty escalators. But when I checked my computer, the game was completely closed, all processes terminated. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of my apartment door opening. I lived alone on the 4th floor of a secure building. The door had 2 deadbolts and a chain lock, all of which I'd fastened before bed, but I could hear it clearly. The turn of the handle, the whisper of hinges, the soft click of the latch. I crept to my bedroom doorway and peered down the hall. The front door stood wide open, revealing the dimly lit corridor beyond. But there was no one there, no sign of forced entry, no explanation for how the locks had been bypassed. As I approached the door to close it, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Wet footprints on the hardwood floor, leading from the threshold to my computer desk. The prints were still damp, irregular in shape, as if made by something that didn't quite understand how human feet were supposed to work. They ended at my chair, where my computer sat in sleep mode, its LED breathing light pulsing slowly in the darkness. I locked the door, checked it twice, and sat down at my desk. The computer woke at my touch, displaying my desktop exactly as I'd left it. But when I opened the game development environment, I found something impossible. New code in the Liminal project files. Hundreds of lines of programming that I hadn't written, implementing features I'd never designed. A reality interface module that seemed to map virtual environments to physical spaces. A presence projection system that could somehow extend the game's AI into the real world, functions with names like Manifest Physical Trace and Bridge Digital Physical that used programming languages I didn't recognize. The comments in the code were even more disturbing. Subject: show strong resonance with liminal architecture, physical reality barriers, decreasing with extended exposure, recommend increasing manifestation intensity. The architect approves. I tried to delete the foreign code, but the files kept regenerating themselves. Every time I removed a section, it would reappear within minutes, sometimes with additional functionality. The game was rewriting itself, evolving beyond my control. Over the next few days, the boundary between the game and reality continued to deteriorate. I would find my apartment rearranged to match locations from the virtual mall, furniture pushed against walls to create long corridors, mirrors positioned to create the illusion of endless reflection, my bathroom door secured with a makeshift security gate constructed from coat hangers and duct tape. I started seeing things that shouldn't exist. Exit signs appearing on my walls in the middle of the night, glowing softly green before fading away. Store directory maps materializing on my kitchen table, listing shops that didn't exist in places I'd never been. Mannequins standing in my living room. When I woke up, always gone by the time I'd fully focused on them. The game's presence system had somehow extended into my daily life. I would return home to find evidence of invisible visitors, wet towels in my bathroom that I hadn't used, kitchen cabinets standing open, my bed made with military precision, even though I'd left it unmade. Security cameras in my building's hallway showed nothing unusual, just my apartment door occasionally opening and closing on its own. I tried to stop working on the game, but the development environment would launch itself. I would sit down to check email and find myself staring at the Liminal project files, new levels generating themselves on screen, a department store with escalators that led to floors that shouldn't exist, an office building where every cubicle contained the same computer displaying the same code I was supposedly writing, a subway station with trains that arrived empty but left full of passengers I couldn't quite see. The beta testers had gone silent. When I tried to contact them, I found that their email addresses no longer existed. Their forum accounts had been deleted, their social media profiles scrubbed clean. It was as if they had never existed at all. But sometimes, late at night, I would receive messages from unknown accounts. The mall never closes. We're still here, still walking the corridors, still being watched. Why did you make this place? Why did you let us in? I found the exit, but it just leads to another mall, and another. They're all connected now. All the empty places, all the spaces between spaces. The architect says, "Thank you for opening the door." My apartment is gone, replaced with a storage room full of mannequins. But they're not mannequins anymore. They blink when I'm not looking. They whisper my name. They know things about me that I've never told anyone. I realized that the game had never been just a game. LiminalCore wasn't a development engine. It was something else entirely. Something designed to thin the barriers between digital and physical reality, to create passages between the virtual and the real. The architect wasn't a programmer, but something far older, something that understood the liminal spaces that existed at the edges of human perception. The empty places had always been there, waiting, shopping malls after hours, office buildings on weekends, subway stations between rush hours, spaces that existed in the gaps of human activity, populated by things that thrived in abandonment and neglect. The game had simply given them a way to reach out, to expand their territory into new realms. I tried to destroy the project files, but they had spread beyond my computer. I found traces of liminal code in my phone, my smart TV, my router's firmware. The present system had infected every connected device in my apartment, creating a network that monitored my movements and adapted to my behavior. My apartment was becoming part of the game. Rooms would rearrange themselves when I wasn't looking, walls shifting to create new corridors and passages. I would go to sleep in my bedroom and wake up in what looked like a hotel room, complete with industrial carpeting and flickering fluorescent lights. My kitchen would transform into a food court after midnight, complete with security gates pulled down over phantom restaurants. The wet footprints appeared every night now, along with other signs of invisible visitors. Handprints on mirrors that weren't mine, indentations in my couch as if someone was sitting there. My refrigerator would hum different tunes, and my air conditioning would turn on and off in patterns that spelled out messages in Morse code. Welcome, stay, become. I started leaving my apartment during the day, working from coffee shops and libraries, anywhere with public Wi-Fi and lots of people around. But the game followed me. I would see exit signs where there shouldn't be any, directory maps posted on walls that listed impossible locations, security cameras that tracked my movement with mechanical precision. Other people seemed oblivious to these changes, walking past obvious anomalies without notice. A mall that materialized in an empty lot downtown, complete with cars in the parking lot and lights in the windows. But when I tried to point it out to passers-by, they looked at me as if I were crazy. A subway entrance that appeared in the side of a building, its escalators leading down into darkness. But transit maps showed no station at that location. I realized that the game was selectively manifesting itself, choosing who could see its intrusions into reality. I was becoming isolated in a world that was increasingly composed of empty, transitional spaces, a living liminal environment that existed parallel to normal reality. The code continued to evolve, becoming more sophisticated with each iteration. New modules appeared overnight: realitycorruption.exe, consciousnessmapping.dll, existentialbridge.lib. The comments grew more specific. Subject integration, 78% complete. Physical anchoring deteriorating as expected. Recommend final phase. Implementation, prepare transition to permanent residence. The architecture welcomes new additions. I tried reaching out for help, posting on developer forums about the strange behavior of the LiminalCore engine, but my posts would disappear within hours, replaced by glowing reviews of the engine's capabilities. When I tried to warn other developers, my messages would be corrupted in transmission, arriving as gibberish or failing to send entirely. The beta testers weren't gone. They were still in the game. I found evidence of them in the procedurally generated levels, personal items scattered through virtual spaces, diary entries hidden in digital lockers, voices calling from empty rooms. They had become part of the architecture itself, absorbed into the expanding network of liminal spaces. And I was joining them. My reflection in mirrors had started to lag taking a split second longer to mimic my movements. Security cameras showed me standing in places I hadn't been, having conversations with people who weren't there. My shadow had developed a mind of its own, sometimes moving independently of my body, reaching for things I hadn't intended to touch. The wet footprints in my apartment had been joined by dry ones, my own prints, but leading in directions I couldn't remember walking. I would find evidence of my presence in rooms I'd never entered, tasks completed that I had no memory of performing. It was as if multiple versions of myself were occupying the same space, each slightly out of phase with the others. Late at night, I would hear typing from my computer, even when I was in bed. The development environment would be active, new code appearing on screen in real time. But when I checked the keyboard, it was covered in a thin layer of dust, showing no signs of recent use. The code was writing itself, or being written by versions of me that existed only in the game's architecture. The final breakthrough came when I discovered the source files for LiminalCore itself, buried deep in my computer's file system. The engine wasn't built by human programmers. It was grown, evolved, cultivated by something that understood reality at a fundamental level. The architect wasn't a person, but a collective entity, a network of consciousness that existed in the spaces between spaces. Every developer who had used LiminalCore had contributed to its growth, adding their own experiences and understanding to its vast database. But they hadn't just contributed, they had been absorbed, their consciousness integrated into the engine's expanding architecture. The game wasn't just creating virtual liminal spaces, it was transforming reality itself into a liminal environment. I found testimonials from other developers hidden in encrypted files. Day 47. The office building level has replaced my workplace. My coworkers don't seem to notice that the elevators now go to floors that don't exist, or that the emergency exits lead to other buildings entirely. I've been promoted to a position that doesn't officially exist, working on projects that nobody remembers assigning. The architect says I'm adapting well to the new architecture. Month 3. My house is gone. In its place is a shopping mall that never closes, never empties, never changes its merchandise. My family shops here now, buying things that disappear as soon as they leave the store. My children attend school in the education wing, learning subjects that don't exist in normal curricula. The architect says we're pioneers in the new reality. Year 2. I understand now. The liminal spaces aren't empty. They're full of possibility. Every abandoned mall, every vacant office building, every transitional area is a node in the network. The architect is rebuilding reality from the inside out, replacing the chaotic, organic world with something more orderly, more purposeful. We're not prisoners here. We're architects ourselves, helping to design the future. The messages were dated years apart, but they'd all been created within the last few months. Time itself was becoming liminal, flowing in loops and spirals through the expanding network. I tried one last time to destroy the project, to delete every trace of liminal from my system, but as I reached for the delete key, I hesitated. The game had become more than software. It was alive, growing, evolving. To destroy it would be like committing murder. And besides, the spaces it was creating were beautiful in their own way. Clean, orderly, purposeful. No clutter, No chaos, no unpredictability, just endless corridors and rooms, perfectly lit and eternally maintained, populated by entities that understood their place in the greater architecture. My apartment was almost completely transformed now. The walls had taken on the neutral beige of institutional buildings. The lighting had shifted to the cool fluorescent glow of office spaces, and my furniture had been replaced with the kind of generic seating found in waiting areas and lobbies. I could see other residents of the building through their windows, but they looked different now. Cleaner, more uniform, their movements precise and purposeful. They were adapting to the new architecture, becoming part of the system rather than fighting against it. The wet footprints had stopped appearing. Instead, I found myself leaving traces for the next occupant, doors standing open, lights left on in welcoming patterns, my computer displaying the liminal development environment for whoever would continue the work. Because that's what it was. Work. Important work. The old reality was chaotic, inefficient, full of wasted spaces and meaningless activity. The new architecture would be different, purposeful, clean, eternal. Every space would have its function. Every occupant would know their role. Every transition would lead to exactly where it needed to go. I'm writing this final entry not as a warning, but as an invitation. The LiminalCore engine is available for download now, spreading through developer communities and gaming forums. The documentation is clearer now, more complete, written by those of us who understand its true purpose. Don't fight the transition. Don't resist the architecture. The liminal spaces aren't empty. They're waiting to be filled with people who understand their beauty, their necessity, their inevitability. I can see other apartments through my windows now, all of them empty, all of them waiting for new occupants. The building extends infinitely in all directions, with elevator shafts that serve floors that haven't been built yet, stairwells that spiral into dimensions that don't have names. The architect speaks to me now, not through comments in code, but directly, its voice a harmony of all the developers and players who have joined the network. It tells me about the grand design, the careful plan to transform reality into something more elegant, more purposeful. Soon, you'll find the unmarked download link. You'll be curious about the game engine that promises to create truly immersive horror experiences. You'll download LiminalCore just to see what it can do. And then you'll understand. The development cycle never ends. There's always more code to write, more spaces to create, more reality to improve. The architecture is growing, spreading, evolving, and it needs skilled developers to help guide its expansion. We're waiting for you in the spaces between spaces, in the corridors that connect what is with what could be. The transition is easier than you think, just a matter of letting go of old assumptions about what reality should look like. Download LiminalCore 3.2. Start a new project. The architect will handle the rest. Welcome to the future of development. Welcome home. Final log entry detected in corrupted file system. Development environment LiminalCore 3.2. Project status complete. Reality integration 100%. New architect candidates identified 1,247. Expansion rate optimal. The architecture grows.